And then now we get to the fun part. So what I generally do is I look at, obviously Google search, say you're looking at a Bristol for sale. You can easily search that. And generally you have controller come up, you have trade a plane, you have our own website. We have a platform called AeroAvion. Make sure you check it out, aeroavion.com. You can list your airplane for free there. So you have all these platforms where you can find listings of new and old airplanes. Now, I prefer to go deeper than that because typically on controllers or sites like that, you're dealing with a broker. Personally, I prefer to deal directly with the owner of the airplane. One, because they're more knowledgeable about the plane, so you can ask important questions and actually get real answers. And two, they are the ones who are emotionally attached to the transaction, right? A broker generally cares about selling for whatever number, whereas when you speak directly to the owner, they're invested, and so it creates room for negotiations is what I'm trying to say. So when you find a listing where you're dealing directly with the owner, that's a good thing. And if you go on a site like aeroavion.com, just like I'm doing right now, easy peasy is you go on there, search for which make and models. You can also go to the categories that you want and search and see what's available. Now, generally speaking, once you find a plane that you like or that is within your budget, that's the beginning of the work, right? You reach out and not everyone is responsive. Now, being on the other side of this, I can tell you some important questions to ask that makes you seem or that presents you as a serious buyer, right? If somebody throws, again, from the seller standpoint, if you just throw a number at a seller, the first thing, that's not a good look, right? Ask important questions. Get the logs for that airplane. Ask questions about, again, assuming that you've now educated yourself on some of the common issues, you can ask those questions. You can ask about maintenance, mainly if there required maintenance that needs to be done on an airplane. For example, I bought a sport cruiser recently. I know that the parachute of that plane needed to be repacked. I know that there's hose work that needed to be done after 5 years or so. I know that with Rotax engines, you have an overhaul for the gearbox after 5 years or ever many hours. All these things you educate yourself about, and once you know them, you can easily just pose these questions to the seller. And how they respond can also help you determine if this would be a good purchase or not. And also, assuming you ask these questions and some of these maintenance has been deferred, that could be a good thing. That could also leave room for you to negotiate the price at a lower price point. Now, once you're engaged in communication with the seller, the next thing, assuming that you guys come to an agreement, schedule a pre-buy. Now, this is the tough part about airplane purchases that nobody talks about. A pre-buy will cost you money, first of all, but even more challenging than that is finding a good shop to do that pre-buy inspection. Because generally speaking, except you get lucky and you can find an airplane that you want to buy locally to you, everything becomes a lot easier. But chances are the plane that you're looking at is either a couple of states away or way across the country somewhere. That said, this is one hurdle that needs to be crossed over. You need to do a pre-buy. You can either bring your own mechanic, which will be easier. Either way, you're spending some money on traveling costs, or if you hire a shop locally to where the plane is to do the pre-buy inspection and pay them their fee. And this will help open your eyes to whatever problems that could be underneath that the owner may not know about or is not foretelling. So a pre-buy inspection, absolutely important. Now, the downside of a pre-buy is you can spend the money and time doing it and then end up not purchasing the airplane. So it's sort of like an investment. So you may win or lose. This is why I encourage you to ask the important questions ahead of time before you do the pre-buy, because the pre-buy may make or break the deal. But also, pre-buy again leaves room for negotiation. So after the pre-buy is done, if there's more issues, that's one thing you could bring to the seller and ask them to either fix it Buying an airplane is very similar to buying a house. It's very similar to buying real estate. So you can go back to the negotiation table and ask for either some grace on price, or if the owner or seller is willing to do the work and fix whatever issues that comes up, and you guys still have a deal. But definitely do a pre-buy inspection. And on the flip side, you can skip a pre-buy inspection, which I would never encourage anyone to do this, but I've done it in the past. And that's partly because I knew about the history of the aircraft and I was very educated about the make and model. Also, I had access to my own mechanic, right? So if you have those three things, and whether if you're an A&P mechanic yourself or you have access to one in-house, then you could potentially skip a pre-buy inspection, save the money, but also buy the airplane at a lower price where you're leaving room for anything crazy that might come up and cost you a ton of money. So that is one way. If you have access to a solid A&P mechanic and you're well educated about the aircraft that you're purchasing, then you may consider skipping your pre-buy. That allows for the deal to close a lot sooner, and you can get the airplane for a lower price than listed. And the last thing I'll talk about is the money aspect, right? So assuming at this point you want to set up an escrow account, make a deposit. Sometimes you could deposit money directly with the seller. I would not advise that, but get an escrow involved and you make a deposit. This makes you a serious contender. And generally when you make a deposit, the seller is not showing the aircraft anymore. You want to get a report. You could do a title search on the airplane, or you can also go on the FAA website and type in the tail number. Gives you and confirms the owner of the aircraft. Usually during a pre-buy inspection, you can find out more about the history of the aircraft, if it's had damage history, but you would hope that the owner or the seller will tell you ahead of time if something has happened with that airplane. But once you're ready to make the purchase, or before you're ready to make the purchase, ask yourself, are you paying cash or are you financing the plane? In my experience, it looks a lot better if you're paying with cash. Deals fall apart all the time due to financing, and I've dealt with both sides. So from the seller standpoint, cash is preferred. One, because they know they're not waiting or they're not wasting their time for a bank to make a decision, right? If you're paying with cash, you look a lot more attractive to the seller, and the seller might consider giving you a lower price because they're getting direct cash from you than say somebody who's looking to finance the purchase. So once you figure that part out, use it as a tool to negotiate on your purchase. All right, that is all I have for you. Again, I'm in the process right now of buying a light sport for our flight training school. And speaking of, it's one thing to purchase an airplane, and it's another to be able to fly the airplane. I'm in the business of training pilots. So if you're looking to get your pilot's license, whether it be your private pilot or your instrument add-on, make sure you check out our flight school at lookupflightacademy.com. We can get you from 0 to private to instrument all the way to commercial. Again, that's lookupflightacademy.com, and coming for a demo flight on the house. Okay, so if you have any questions, please leave in the comments below. I'm gonna check this because this is an important conversation for me. I get a lot of questions offline about aircraft purchases, so make sure you leave in the comments below. Also consider being a paid member on Mojo Grip. What we started doing is uploading exclusive content now for our paid members. So a lot of videos that you will not see publicly on the channel or the website, you can have access to it if you're a paid member. All right, so please consider supporting the channel. YouTube doesn't pay us buku money like everybody thinks. Quite the opposite. It actually costs more to bring this content to you guys than we're getting paid for it. All right, so your support will greatly help with creating more content. All right, thanks so much for spending time with me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. See you in the next video. Peace.